In case you missed it earlier this week, the National Association of Realtors released a new policy called multiple listing options for sellers, where they've formally introduced a new way for sellers to potentially market their properties without fully marketing their properties. And they've put out some FAQs around that, and that's what we're breaking down on today's video. So for those who haven't met me, my name is Chris Cox. I am the education director as well as a real estate broker here in the state of North Carolina. And today, like I said, we're going to break down this policy. Now, I will add an asterisk to this video as I'm recording this on March 26, 2025. This is brand new as of yesterday. MLSs have not had the chance to show what implementation, how they're going to implement the changes, and this is just my interpretation of the policy as I read it. I am going to link to the full FAQ website that NAR has put out in the description of this video, but let's break down what I think are the pros and cons and show some of the screenshots from that document from NAR. So let's go and talk a little bit about some of these what they're calling multiple seller options. Basically, high level, 30,000 foot level, it allows an opportunity for that's kind of not office exclusive. It's not fully on market, and it's more than a coming soon. So if you think of it at that level, I think it has an opportunity again to add another option for sellers who want to some of the, again, marketing, but not full marketing. So let's talk about what this is and at least what I see as the pros out there. So from a pro perspective, I think it does add some more options for sellers. I know many of us have come across those sellers that are hesitant to list because they don't want all of their neighbors to know, or they want a little more privacy, or maybe they're concerned that their property, their vacant property is going to end up as one of those rental scams that are out there. Those are growing and growing and growing. This allows that option to market it without, a full-blown portal marketing or, a public-facing marketing, no sign in the yard, any of that kind of stuff. So it does allow a couple more options. I also feel that this levels the playing field a little bit more for smaller firms to compete. And what I mean by that, if you look at office exclusives, they've really only had value if you were in a huge firm. So if you didn't want to go fully to market and you wanted that office exclusive, you could only market it inside of your firm. Now, if you're at a firm that has 4 brokers at it, office exclusive is really not going to be an option for you to present to your sellers. And so that is, I think, a great option to level that playing field. I also do feel like this is, part of let's just say a accommodation to some of the people who are against clear cooperation policy and wanted it repealed. I think this is a good, negotiation, stopgap in there to rather than repealing it completely. My interpretation of it as another pro, unlike the coming soon, so I did see some comments in some of the early posts that, well, we already had coming soon. We've had that for years. Coming soons in most markets, at least most of the markets that I have seen, those could not be shown. I don't see anything in the description of this that these cannot be shown. I think they can be shown, they can go under contract. They just have marketing limitations on what they can do as far as signage, as far as print flyers, all of that kind of stuff can't be done with this. And I'll show some screenshots from those FAQs as well. I also do feel, and this is kind of a pro for some real estate brokers, but I also feel it's a con for consumers, and we'll get to that in a second. So it is a value add, for buyers who are able to connect, or for brokers who are able to connect with buyers and say, hey, if you work with me, I have access to some listings that you're not going to see out there on some of the third-party portals like Zillow and Redfin and Realtor and all those kind of things. So, it does add that value add that, hey, if you want to have access to, you don't want to miss out on all these properties, connect with me. I can help you as a buyer's agent, and I'll have access to more listings than are on those portals. So that breaks me into, again, what I wanted to talk about with some of the the FAQs that were provided by NAR. So this is kind of the screenshot here of the difference. Basically, is it the same as an office exclusive? And it's not the same as an office exclusive. As you can see for this year, an office exclusive is an exempt listing where the seller has directed the property is not disseminated through the MLS and is not publicly marketed. An office exclusive may require submission under laws, but is not disseminated to other MLS participants. That, I think, is the huge part of this. And I don't think, again, my early conversations with some of the brokers, and this is on a, not just a North Carolina level, I have seen some threads put out there that, they're like, oh, this is just a coming soon, or it's just an office exclusive. It is not. Through this new policy, these listings go into the MLS. They go to the public, not to the public, they go to other brokers at other firms. And then they also go to any subscriptions. Like if you have your clients set up on subscriptions on your VOW, your virtual office website, it feeds to them. So it feeds to your consumers. And I think this is a huge part here to this, is that it gives them a lot of the options. It gives sellers the options for not full marketing, because again, that's one of the cons that we'll talk about here in a couple minutes. It's not full marketing, it's not full exposure, but it is more than what I feel an office exclusive can offer. So that is one of the screenshots I wanted to share there. Listing agents who representing, again, if you go to the FAQs, there is going to be disclosures that need to be signed saying, hey, seller understands that, putting it in marketing it in this way is not full exposure for that property, and they have to weigh out the personal pros and cons for them. So those are a couple things there. Is delayed marketing exempt? It is a delayed marketing exempt listing available for MLS participants and subscribers. And I think this is the huge part here. Yes, a delayed marketing exempt listing will be available to other MLS participants. Again, this is where I think that leveling of the playing field that the office exclusive doesn't have, and subscribers through the MLS platform. So they can inform their consumers. So again, they have the opportunity to inform their consumers of these policy changes here. So those are some of the pros. Again, I would love to hear what you think about this. And hey, if you're liking what you see here, share this with 5 of your broker friends. We need to get this word out. This is about us understanding all of the options for our sellers, and just making sure that we are communicating those options to our sellers, so that we know, again, hey, even if you don't think it's a right way to do it, you need to know it's an option for the sellers, because it's going to come up in conversations. And, we've all had those conversations with our sellers, and they're like, well, I'd love to go on the market, but, I just don't want that sign in the yard. Well, this kind of gives that, a kind of medium option, in between there. So those are some of the pros. Let's talk about the other side here and some of, my initial thoughts on those cons. So again, as I mentioned, this is not full exposure. You cannot convince me that you are getting full exposure to a listing without a proper putting it into the multiple listing service. And this includes for sale by owners. This includes office exclusive. This includes, some firms that have their exclusives that they've been working through the system on. You cannot convince me that that is full marketing, full exposure for a property. So another con, again, I firmly believe that listings should create more listings and should create, at least 2 other pieces of business for you, whether that's through buyer lead generation or through, meeting people at open houses. Yes, there are some other ways you can spin this into additional lead generation opportunities. Say, hey, I sold this property, as a delayed listing. The sellers weren't inconvenienced. You can market that for sure, get some opportunities, but doing it in this manner from a broker's perspective, you could potentially lose some lead generation opportunities. I don't know why I left that bullet up point there for showings on like coming soon. That's not a con here. That is just up from the previous slide. Now, again, what I think is the biggest con, in my opinion, my early interpretation of the FAQs, again, which I will link in the description below. It forces some consumers into relationships to gain access to listings. So it's not full transparency. It's not making people put it into the MLS, which is going to feed out to third-party portals. So there will be, let's just say, as an example, here in the Triangle MLS or Dorify MLS, let's just say as of today, there are 8,000 listings out there. And let's just say 2% of sellers decide, hey, I want to do this delayed marketing option here. I want to see what I can do in 10, 14 days, with delayed full marketing. And that, again, let's just say 2% do that. 8,000 listings, currently in the Dorify MLS or somewhere around that. That's 160 listings. That maybe it's 3 or 4 listings that consumers don't have full access to through this option, and the only way they can get that is to force a relationship with a real estate broker, which I obviously think that all people should be using real estate brokers, but I don't think they should be forced to use a real estate broker to gain access to properties. And I don't think that is necessarily, in the seller's best interest all the time either. I think it is in our best interest for sure, that they have a buyer broker or representation for them as well. But so those are some of my cons there. Again, I'm just going to go to some other FAQ screenshots that I picked out of here. And let's go back to that screen there. So this is another one from that FAQs. Can a seller and listing broker advertise their delayed exempt market listing on other websites in addition to the listing broker's website? And again, unlike office exclusives, this is a yes, they can. During delayed marketing period, the home seller and listing agent can market in a manner consistent with the net seller's needs and interests. And this includes virtual office websites and MLS subscription portals. So during the delayed marketing period, the home seller and listing agent can market the listing in a manner consistent with the seller's need. At the same time, the delayed marketing will be available to other MLS participants through the MLS platform so they can inform their consumers about the property. So again, like I said, we're still super early on this. I wanted to put this together. I again do have some questions still remaining, and so what are my it's too early to tell on this. And number one is going to be, how will MLSs implement this? What are they going to do for days on market? Is this delayed marketing going to count for delays on marketing for days on market? Is it not going to count? I think it probably will count as days on market, just like coming soons have in the last year, the last couple of years, once they clarified coming soons, that those would count as days on markets. We'll see on that. I would love to see some clarity on what consumers will see, what and when and where. I see VOW, the virtual office website, and I think of that as the subscriptions that I set my clients up for, so they receive those daily email notifications of all the listings. I think that that's the way that will come out. I don't think it's just, hey, we have access to them and we have to call our consumers with them. Again, I'd like some clarity on that. And I am hoping that, I would love to see some, again, for North Carolina, that there is some North Carolina Association of Realtor forms for seller disclosure, because that is part of the requirement, is that the seller signs off on that, and not MLS specific forms. So, again, this is just for my own ease of use. All of my forms that come from NCAR, they're easy to get in there. Whenever I have an MLS specific form, like for coming soons as an example, I don't think that I'm not going to be in love with that if that's the way they do it. I'm hoping that NCAR makes this either as an addendum to the listing agreement, which is clearly going to have to change with these new options there. But so that is my story there. Again, like I said, some of that stuff is too early, but I wanted to put this together because I think it's important that we start having these conversations as real estate professionals. What are your thoughts? What do you think about this? If you made it to the end, give me a subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And like I said earlier, share this with 5 people, 5 real estate brokers in your community that you think would benefit from learning this kind of stuff. Again, we don't want this to fall under the radar. These technically go into effect today. MLSs have until, I believe, September 30th to implement the changes, but you can apparently start doing these if you have listing paperwork for this delayed marketing option, that goes into effect on March 25th. So again, thank you for watching. Hope you got some good stuff out of this. I would love to know in the comments what you think of this. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it It really doesn't change anything, which is what I'm hearing from the initial feedback from brokers. So thanks for watching. Hope to talk to you soon.